All right. Welcome to this week's session. I am happy to have Aakarsh Sethi, our Senior Product Manager, back with us today. Today, we're going to focus on streamlining the fax intake process with the use of AI. So welcome back, Aakarsh. Happy to have you here.
Happy to be back.
All right. Let's jump right in. So let's talk about first, I think it's hard to believe that in 2022, we're talking about fax usage, but we are. So how prevalent is fax usage right now in healthcare? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, let's start right there, right? It's 2022. We have so many advances in technology and different aspects of technology, but the uses of fax and physical paper, especially in the healthcare industry, is so rampant. You know, our chief product officer, Navneet Nair, often jokes with us that, you know, it's going to be 2040, iPhone 45 is going to be out, but, you know, people are still going to be using faxes in hospitals to do all the business. And, you know, I have some numbers here. If anyone's interested in sources, happy to share them after. But, and these are based on different physician surveys. But 90% of healthcare providers today still use fax in some
90%?
Any capacity, absolutely 9 and 10. Just within healthcare, anywhere between 9 to 15 billion faxes are sent every year. And then in terms of how much is spent on them, it's crazy to think of some of these figures, but $60 billion are spent annually on processing these faxes. Each fax takes about $6 to $8. Again, there's high variance depending on the use case, but on average, it's about $6 processing time for one fax. And the average time it takes to process a fax, again, highly variable on what you're doing with it and the use case, but the average there is about, again, 6 to 8 minutes, just taking one fax in, reading through it, interpreting what it means, and then, you know, taking the action that you need to with that fax. So, right, all of these numbers sound pretty crazy, but that is the reality that we live in. So, you know, let's get from the abstract to the specifics now. Where are these faxes being used, right? And in terms of the highest frequency use cases, just plain simple record sharing, referrals, of course, is a primary core part of fax utility today. Other places where faxes are being used, of course, is to communicate lab and test results, right? Then with pharmacy communication and also payer communication, right? Things like checks in the form of prior authorization. Oftentimes you have to fax patient clinical documentation to payers. Another use case that I'm particularly interested in is patient enrollment. Anytime new patients have to be enrolled, you know, you see some of these digital kiosks and online forms, but a lot of practices still use physical paper that then get scanned and faxed, so on and so forth. So, yeah.
How do you see providers currently processing faxes? What are the challenges that you're seeing within that?
Yeah, so, I mean, let's move on to then what are they doing with all these faxes, right? Within the use case. And I mentioned referrals, and referrals is a great example to illustrate really how burdensome and manually intensive some of these processing steps can take. So let's start with referrals. Why are referrals so rampant? First of all, referrals are required for multiple specialties. You know, you want to, a patient needs a physical therapy or an occupational therapy, you know, the provider needs to send a referral. A lot of different imaging require referrals. And of course, from a PCP, a specialist has to be seen by the patient. You know, you require a referral for that as well. So again, very high frequency based on specialty of referrals being required. Now, why is this a problem though? Because a lot of, with the move away from inpatient care to outpatient care, we're seeing so many of these outpatient providers now really putting their grasp on the market and their market footprints increasing. We have so many more outpatient providers. So when you look at them, you look at the ASCs and the standalone imaging centers, they get external referrals, right? And it's usually highly segmented, their physician market. So they're getting referrals not just from, let's say, one regional hospital or one major hospital. They're getting it from, physician groups, small physician groups, large physician groups, multi-specialty physician groups, different types of hospital systems,
right.
So on and so forth. So they need to get all these referrals in, and no prizes for guessing how these referrals come in today, right? Most of them still come in through faxes. Infinix has a large clientele of outpatient providers, and I've spoken to a lot of them, and while they would like to move into some sort of digital intake format, a lot of them, for a large percentage of their volume, still deal with faxes. Sure, a little bit is done through emails or other forms of communication, but the majority is still fax centric. Right. So once you receive a fax, what do you do with it, right? For a referral, you have to enter that into your EMR, or if it's an imaging center, your RIS, LIS, so on and so forth. So someone then has to review the different types of incoming referrals, extract information based on the patient, right? So who is the patient? Who is the ordering physician? What are the patient details, patient insurance details? What are they coming in for? What's the procedure? Is their diagnosis listed? So they have to read the referral, extract this information, and then enter it into their host system, let's say an EMR. So this is why, I was alluding earlier to the fact that it is a manually intensive process, relative to the size of the process that it is in its entirety, right? You're spending almost more time extracting and processing the fax than you are, receiving the fax. And that too is done in a couple of different ways. So believe it or not, a lot of providers today still have just folders in their system where they're just manually segregating faxes by physician and dates, and then they have teams opening files and folders. Other providers have some sort of an intake system as part of their EMR where the faxes get collated, but essentially there's nothing else happening there. You still have their staff coming on, trying to sift through all the different faxes and performing the same functions as I mentioned before. So that's the deal with referrals. Similarly, you have processes with respect to patient enrollment on the front end, or on the back end with remits and EOB. So that is just a gist of what's going on here.
So I think our kind of knee-jerk reaction is always to throw technology at something, but let's talk a little bit about what some of those challenges are with using technology to move away from a fax intake process.
Right, and I mean, spot on, right, Kate? Why haven't we used technology to solve this problem yet, right? This problem has existed forever, almost, right? We're doing all sorts of cutting edge work with, use AI and imaging and trying to predict cancers forming up. Why haven't we been able to digitize these incoming faxes? So here's the deal with that, right? I think this whole process poses an interesting and unique challenge within the realms of healthcare. And I'll walk through what those are. First is, because I mentioned that the big use case for a process like this is to the outpatient providers, ASCs, and they have so many different positions and types of settings that they get incoming referrals for. So that's clearly not a centralized process. So what that means is they get different types of referrals. So no two settings and systems will have the same templates in which they send referrals. They won't have the same formats in terms of the information, and even the type of file they send. Some can send PDFs, JPEGs. A lot of the times it's just scanned images of PDFs or of other documents. So that poses a unique challenge because we've had traditional forms of technology such as OCR that could deal with something like this, right? If you are able to extract text and then you can use what we call some rules-based logic, where let's say the computer is able to identify that this word means patient and this what's with a certain amount of space, what follows it is always the patient name. You could theoretically in the past use technology with combining OCR and rules to solve for some of this problem. But what technology vendors found out is that it doesn't work as simply as that, right? Because there's so much of variance, even in the types of information within the machine extractable formats that get presented to us, let alone formats that are not machine extractable, such as images. So I'll give you a classic example. Let's say that you get an incoming referral or a fax, which has the patient information on the left-hand side, and then the physician information on the right-hand side. OCR technology will try to read that line, and it will essentially conflate physician information with patient information. And then you essentially have no distinction between that this is patient or this is physician, right?
Right.
We've also seen that, the OCR that is available in the market doesn't work well with healthcare specific documentation. So, those were the limitations that technology essentially itself had been working with. What happened, in the late 2010s, 2016, 2017, was that there were some advances made in forms of AI, such as natural language processing, that really, gave us a breakthrough in terms of looking at some of these problems. And I think, I would love to talk about that next.
Yeah, I think we should. So let's talk about how NLP is starting to solve the fax intake process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we at Infinix realized was that this is just simply not an OCR or a rules-based logic problem. It actually, requires artificial intelligence in the form of what we call computer vision and natural language processing. So I'll focus on NLP and why NLP is important here. So let me give you an example of a patient chart. Let's say that the patient chart contains a history of a patient. It outlines the symptoms that they've been dealing with and the different diagnoses that's prevalent within the patient encounter. Now, simple OCR, what it does is it basically takes every line and just converts it into text. Now, OCR doesn't have the ability to do anything else with the data. It can't understand the data. It can't interpret the data, right? And that's what natural language processing essentially is able to do. So it's a sub-branch of artificial intelligence that focuses really on understanding, interpreting, and learning from language, right? Or text. Text is one application here, but even if you're familiar with home audio devices such as Alexa, Google Home, they're essentially able to understand and do things that you tell them to through natural language processing, right? And we're using that same technology to better learn and understand healthcare language, right? And that's the field essentially that we are operating within, which is not just generic NLP, but NLP understanding the semantics and the idiosyncrasies of healthcare language. So what that allows us then to do within, say, a referral document is first utilize OCR in converting images into text, but not just taking that into face value, right? Really training the machine based on, if not millions and millions, but hundreds and thousands of past examples to really understand what's going on. So in a scenario where some things don't look right, the NLP essentially will guide us and tell us that, no, this is probably not the meaning here. This is a discrepancy. This is an error. This is what the real meaning was. And healthcare is just rife with such use cases where oftentimes, physicians will write short forms or will write different versions of certain texts. In a sentence, you might have something we refer to as negation or temporal values, which is you're actually talking about a certain diagnosis or a procedure, but you're saying that that should not be done, or that was done in the past or in the present or the future. Also, you have some other maybe contraindications that are listed somewhere else that OCR is unable to just correlate that to everything else that's happening within that document. NLP helps us to understand that. So essentially what it does is gives us a reliable and holistic output when trying to convert an image into text that we can, actionable text is what I'll call it.
Great. So we've talked about how NLP can help. What should providers start to look for in terms of the solution?
Right. So I think there's more to, an overall solution from a fax intake and streamlining point of view. I think core technology, we spoke on OCR, rules, NLP. I think the NLP aspect is key, right? When you look into, say, partnering with a vendor, are they simply OCR rules based, or do they have that natural language processing component to it? But that's not enough, right? If you're using a third-party solution for this, it has to be able to integrate with your host solution. Otherwise, if you have your team really going on to another portal or other solution, uploading documents, doing the same thing, you're not really capitalizing on the amount of value that could be extracted from a solution like this. Right? You're still duplicating effort and you're wasting time. So potentially something that could integrate with your host solution and provide a seamless experience, right? Where, let's say you have an intake process, an intake portal or component on your EMR, a solution that just integrates with it, where documents come back flagged with all the information, right? Let's say you need from every document you're trying to extract a certain set of keys and values, say patient details, physician details, insurance details. So that solution can automatically query your system when a new referral or new fax has come in, process the document, identify, all the entities that you need, and then send it back into your system so that your team just has a look at the document and they're like, okay, this is all the information. This is the patient name, patient data. Great. And then they can go ahead and then, put it in the schedule. Solutions can actually take it one step further, which is what, we're trying to do, which is actually integrate it in an actionable format back into your scheduling or your EMR, where that information is taken, and based on some rules, we can actually create that new patient record or create a new order within your system so that your team then doesn't even have to do that, right? So that essentially automates that entire process, because that's essentially what's happening from a referral that's coming back, right? You're looking at the referral, and if the patient is an existing patient, you're creating a new order, or you're amending an existing order. If the patient is not an existing patient, you're creating a new patient record and then creating a new order under it. So that whole task that is done manually can also be automated through bidirectional interface or integration through a third-party solution.
Great answers. Really good advice. So we've got a question here. What's the best way for providers to start reducing their reliance on fax for referrals? Where do we start?
So the question is, what's the best way for providers to start reducing their reliance on fax or for referrals, right? So I think, again, it depends on what type of provider you have, right? If you are a hospital system where, your referrals are essentially internal, you already have a leg up because you're probably using that same Epic or Cerner system and your referrals are transmitted electronically. But if you are in, this precarious position of that outpatient setting where you're getting a ton of volume from outside, there's no simple solution, unfortunately, because you can change or institute change in one person or organization's behavior. But if you have an extremely segmented physician market where you're dealing with, 50, 100, 200 physicians, it's hard to knock on every door and tell them to start doing something new. And I think that's why, we've created this solution, because the ideal approach would be that you use just an intake portal, right? Where you ask all your physicians to come on and say that we will no longer accept faxes. You have to come on to this portal and you have to send us referrals that way. If you have a fairly consolidated physician market or you have that market size, I would say definitely look in that direction. But if you don't, and if you think you're going to be unable to do that, then you should look into partnering with a solution like the one that I just mentioned, so that at least your administrative overheads can be controlled.
And are we seeing these solutions on both the referring provider as well as the ordering, or?
Yeah, I think depending on the use case, right? I think the referral use case is definitely important to an outpatient rendering provider. But even for the referring provider, there's a lot of clinical data management or, let's say prior authorizations, faxing clinicals to payers, for example, where faxes are still, rampant. So the same solution can be applied to any use case, essentially, that deals with images and faxes and where digital data, text has to be extracted from it.
You brought up a good point. It's for those that are a part of a larger system, it tends to be easier, using one of the Epics or the Cerners of the world, but the outpatient market it's a lot more challenging because groups are on their own to start to initiate these solutions. So want to give everybody a last chance to ask some more questions. I'm not seeing anything, but while we're giving folks another minute, what are your marching orders, Aakarsh? What's your call to action for folks that are listening today? Where do they start? What do I do?
Yeah, so clearly this is a relevant problem to a bunch of providers today, right? Now, I know that a lot of providers are focused on the RCM side of things when it comes to this, and patient access, patient intake has now taken the forefront in a lot of providers' minds. But typically when providers think about patient access or patient intake, they're looking at verifications and benefits, or how do you schedule the patient. I think what gets missed is this process of intaking the documents, right? And it ties in very seamlessly and very importantly to that registration and scheduling. So, if you think about this space, I think, and solving for some of the challenges that you have here, I think it can really have benefits downstream, such as, optimizing your scheduling process and make you increasing your throughput of patients, and so on and so forth.
All really, really good advice. All right, looks like you're off the hook. No more questions for you today. All right, well, thank you to those that have joined. Big thank you to you, Aakarsh. Thanks for sharing all of your wisdom as usual. If you think of questions that pop up after we're done today, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to answer those questions, and we hope to see everybody back here again next week. Thanks again, Aakarsh.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone.
All right, have a great one. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.